Getting the first poll reaction to what we just heard from the President of the United States, David Chalian, our political director. We did an instant poll, CNN ORC poll, among those people who actually watched the speech.
And that's an important thing to remember because, of course, people who watch the speech are, when a Republican president delivers a speech like this to a joint session, more inclined that Republicans will watch the speech. We saw this with Democratic presidents and Republican presidents. That is true tonight as well. That being said, Donald Trump got some great reviews tonight. Take a look at these first numbers, reaction to the speech. 57% of speech watchers had a very positive reaction, 21% somewhat positive, 21% negative. Then we asked if Donald Trump's policies will indeed move the country in the right direction or the wrong direction. 69% of speech watchers say his policies are going to move the country in the right direction. Wrong direction, 26%. And take a look at that 69% because he grew over the course of the speech. Pre-speech, 58% of the speech watchers said they thought his policies were going to move the country in the right direction. After watching the speech, that went up 11 points to 69%. And finally, did the speech make the country more optimistic, or at least those watching the speech? 69% of speech watchers, again, a very high number there for Donald Trump, are more optimistic about the future, about the country, having watched Donald Trump's speech, 28% more pessimistic.
Did he do better than President Obama did in his first address before a joint session of Congress, that President Bush did before his first address before a joint session of Congress? Because they always get a bump.
Yes, both President Obama and President Bush on their first speeches were a little bit higher in terms of the positive reaction, but it's all in the ballpark. I mean, that number there is a really good number for Donald Trump. We know going in, Donald Trump was at historical lows in approval rating and a very polarizing president. So I think these marks are right in the ballpark there and quite good for Donald Trump.
Good numbers. Jake.
Not a surprise. I thought it was a speech that was well delivered, and he has certainly been on something of a charm offensive as of late. You know, I think the difference between talking about one's principles for health care and then actually the act of repealing and replacing Obamacare, those are two very different things. Taking 3 minutes to honor a Gold Star wife after less than a month after her husband, Navy SEAL Ryan Owens, died serving his country. A moving moment. President Trump certainly rose to the moment. We all felt moved by her tears, moved by the recognition of his sacrifice. That is a wonderful moment. Questions about that Yemen raid, which we will continue to hear and continue to hear about, not so positive. So it's not a surprise, but you know, President Trump saying it's time to put trivial things aside, that's nice. President Trump getting up in the middle of the night to tweet nasty things at a Hollywood actress, we'll see how that plays out.
No, that's exactly right. And when you look at the people who are most worried about Donald Trump's tweeting and the erratic things that he has said, the people who are in the audience tonight in the room, House Republicans, Senate Republicans, and the Republicans around the country, there's no question they are breathing a sigh of relief. I mean, we've heard it from them. We see it in even, I mean, Mitch McConnell is not the most, you know, I think he would say the most animated person, and even he looked like he was sort of on a little bit of a high, given the fact that there was concern. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There was concern about the fact that President Trump, if he did stick to script, which he largely did, he would probably be okay. If he had Donald Trump rally moments, not so much. He didn't.
I would just add, sorry, that this goes beyond the base. If nearly 8 in 10 speech watchers say they are either having a somewhat or very positive reaction to the speech, that's beyond just his base.
Yeah, Anderson, very, very good numbers for the president. The reaction among these people who actually watched the speech.
Yeah, it certainly is. We're also joined now by the panel by Stephen Moore, who was a senior economic advisor for the Trump campaign as chief economist for the Heritage Foundation. I'm wondering what you heard tonight. We've had a lot of discussion about were there any details there in terms of how these things are going to be paid for. What did you hear from the speech?
So, well, we just got confirmation that this was a virtuoso performance for Donald Trump. I work with Donald Trump on the campaign. I always said there's a good Donald Trump and there's a bad Donald Trump, and we certainly saw the good Donald Trump tonight.
We're familiar with some of that.
Now, why is this important? Because, you know, if you look at the latest Wall Street Journal poll, Donald Trump's approval rating was, what, 43, 44%. You can't govern if you have an approval rating less than 50%. He's got to get that number up, you know, 50, 55, maybe hopefully above that. And if he does, that makes what he wants to do legislatively so much easier. So there's two things he has to do, Anderson, this year on the economy. He's got to do something about Obamacare, and we'll see how that looks. And the second thing, and maybe even more importantly, he's got to get this tax cut done. He wasn't too specific about the details of the plan, but that has to get done. I mean, you know, Rick, I mean, businesses want that tax cut. They want the details. And the one thing I'm concerned about, don't wait. Do that right now. Get it done. I wish he had said, send me a tax cut bill and get it on my desk in 100 days.
Because there are a lot of Republicans who wish they'd already heard something about that. They feel like it's been pushed down the road.
Well, look, I mean, there's no reason this has to wait. They've got a Republican House, Republican Senate. He's been very clear on this. You do that business tax cut. You know, you were all talking about the deficit issue. You're not going to bring the deficit down. You were in the Senate. You know this. If you have less than 2% growth like we've had the last 7 years, you're never going to make progress. You get that growth up, and I think we can get to 3.5 to 4%. Then a lot of these other problems.
You think that's possible to actually get 3?
I really do.
Wait,
yeah.
you
If you do the pro-American energy policy, so if you produce American oil and gas and coal,
which we're doing,
and then you
Which
do
we're
the
doing.
tax
We're now
cut.
the world
Yeah,
leader
Yeah,
in
but
oil
there's
production.
so much more that
No,
we can
that's just
produce.
not
Oh,
true.
yes, there is.
Listen,
Oh, yes,
trust
there's
me,
about 100 projects that Barack Obama would not allow go forward that
Yeah,
we can
because-
be green-lighted right
and-
away. And those are billions of dollars of investments.
Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
And this kind of goes to this whole question that we've been having about regulation and our good friend here.
Yeah.
At a certain point, the trade-off in terms of economic development versus what you're doing in public health and what you're doing in natural resources begins to kick in. Under Barack Obama, under President Obama, we became a leading producer, not just of natural gas, but also
That
of
was
oil.
despite him, not because of him.
No.
Yeah.
Well, listen. Well,
I mean, that was because of the
let me
fracking
finish. Let me
revolution,
finish.
right? I mean, right.
You had your turn. I think it's very dangerous for us to do budgeting based on this fantasy that we can get to 3.5%, 4% growth. There is no developed country in the world right now that's approaching those numbers. We're beating Europe. We're beating Japan right now. You're dealing with a global set of challenges that you're now saying that, and this is shocking to come from you with Heritage, that you think that domestic regulatory changes can overcome global headwinds of less than 1%. Okay, well, listen.
About it. We can bring all these jobs here.
And now here's the deal. Your Heritage.
Yeah.
If we do what you say,
Yeah.
and we don't get that growth, you create a budget catastrophe worse than even I'm comfortable with, and I'm
worse than-
deliberate.
Worse than even Barack Obama
Well,
created
listen,
with
well, first of all,
the
he
I mean, I hear
he
you
had
guys
to-
talking all night about the
No,
deficit.
hey, listen,
You know, you
it's
called
so
him the
bad.
bankrupter in chief.
Yes.
We just had the bankrupter
No,
in chief, didn't we?
no. We had the person who
$8
saved
trillion
we had somebody who
in
just
debt.
saved the U.S. economy from the worst recession since
Yeah.
the Great Depression. That's
Right.
President Obama.
But we also added $9 trillion to the debt.
Yes,
in 8 years.
to deal with what George W. Bush did.
Right.
But I want to hear from you because you are, as good as anybody on your team. Is there not a downside? Is there not a risk that we go beyond, we have deficits beyond what even I am comfortable with as a liberal based on what you're saying?
I want to cut spending, no question about it. But what I'm saying is, if we go forward with 1.8% growth, which is what we had last year, and we've been averaging less
Beating
than 2%
Europe,
growth,
beating Japan.
you're not. Yeah, but look, you keep saying we can't achieve 3.5%, 4% growth. We did that under JFK. We did that under Ronald Reagan. There's a great book I want to recommend to you by my buddy Larry Kudlow called JFK and the Reagan Revolution. The two periods of great economic growth in this country were preceded, you know this, Rick, by big supply-side rate reductions. You get those business tax rates down, I guarantee you those businesses are coming back.
I'm envisioning Van Jones reading Larry Kudlow's stuff right now.
Again, sir?
So why are Republicans and why is this White House saying we're not going to do tax cuts until we do health care reform?
I think it's a mistake.
Well, they are saying that because they figure, first of all, one thing at a time. They want to do health care reform under budget reconciliation, which means that they'd only have to get 50 votes in the Senate.
I think
and
they're
they don't
making
want
a strategic. The answer, Gloria, is I think they're making a strategic mistake. I think you've got to get that tax cut. Look, what was the number one issue about this campaign? What is the one thing Americans care most about? Jobs and the economy, right? Jobs and the economy. If Trump can get that tax cut done, if he can get the regulations off the backs of businesses, I was part of, Ben, I was part of something called the Trump Leadership Council. We met with leaders of the major American companies in transportation, manufacturing, Silicon Valley companies, and they said exactly what Rick said earlier.
Did you
Their
meet with
biggest problem right
Did you
now is
meet
the
with the-
regulatory hurdles
But
but they say these are are the guys who create the jobs.
Let's have the fight. Let's have the fight. All right. I mean, you can go next. But I just first of all, did you meet with the workers? Because the problem that we have in the United States is that we actually have profitable corporations that are doing very well, and they're not sharing it with the workers. The problem isn't a lack of jobs; it's a lack of good jobs. We have a lot of people who are working very hard for very little because we don't have enough sharing of the profits from the corporations. Giving them a bigger set of opportunities by deregulation and tax cuts does not guarantee anybody gets a job or a good job.
I don't want to hog this conversation, but I'm going to correct you on economics. The reason we haven't seen the kind of recovery that most Americans wanted to see, you're right, American companies are profitable. You know this, Governor. They're profitable. What they're not doing is reinvesting those profits into the business. And when you have companies invest, that's how you help businesses. When they invest in new plants and equipment and machinery.
Problem, sir. You want to act like every problem in the U.S. economy started with President Obama.
I'm
Frankly,
not saying
President
that.
Obama came in to fix
It's been
this problem.
15 years. Even these problems began under Bush, but it's been 15 years since the average American worker has had a pay raise.
And you think that's because of regulation? I'm going to tell you it's
Regulation,
not.
taxes, and
Governor, will you
taxes.
please?
I want to ask a question though, because you started out by saying that when he unleashes the American energy,
Yep.
I assume you mean the fossil fuel energy. Why-
And nuclear power, too.
And nuclear, okay, but why wouldn't you also include renewables in that, given that they have had 20 to
Because it's
25% growth, and there's more people working?
Do you know how
there's more
we
people,
spent
there's-
100?
Don't even go there.
We-
Don't
Governor,
even go there. You
Governor,
don't think the oil and gas industry
Do you know what
has been
percentage
subsidized?
of American energy today comes from wind and solar power, despite $150 billion?
And you know
About
what?
4%.
Do you know how many people? I'm talking about people who are working in that. There are more people who are working in the clean energy industry
Than what?
writ large
Than
than
coal
there
miners, for
are. Than in
Well,
the
that's
coal
because you
industry.
laid off all the coal
No,
workers.
come on. But
Yes, it
why
is.
would you?
The
Why
clean-
would you? Why would you disparage that work? Why, if we want to create jobs, why
Governor,
wouldn't we create all kinds of jobs? Why
I'm in
is that
favor.
lesser to
I
you?
don't have a problem with wind and solar energy, but get rid of all the subsidies. So we can get rid of all
get
the
rid of
subsidies.
oil and gas.
Okay, you got a deal.
Okay,
we'll
well,
get rid of all
of
the side here.
right?
We're getting rid
Oil
of all
and
the
gas
subsidies.
I'm just interested, Steve. I barely passed math, so I'm going to ask you some questions here to help clarify. The president says he is going to go for a $1 trillion infrastructure plan. We're not sure exactly what form that will take. It's going to increase military spending by 10%. He's going to increase spending on veterans, and he's going to go for a very, very large tax cut. And he's not going to touch entitlements, Social Security or Medicare. How does this work? I'm just trying to understand it from your perspective.
Well, look, all that spending makes me queasy. I'm not here to defend everything that Donald Trump said tonight, and I think $1 trillion, we already spend $1 trillion every 10 years at the federal level on infrastructure, so it has to be spent very wisely. Whether the Defense Department needs more money, I'm not a defense expert, but I will say this, and I've asked others on the CNN shows, show me, David, one Democrat, one, in the House or Senate that wants to talk about reducing Medicare and Social Security spending. I can't find a single one.
No, I'm not arguing.
Right.
I think there's
So
a
how
lot of
can the
support for those
Republicans do it on their
programs.
own?
There are a lot of people who are supportive of those programs because you've got middle-income people who are struggling and who need those programs. So but
But
they're
you're
also
asking
not.
Republicans
They're
to-
also not.
Yeah,
They're
look,
not suggesting
But David,
all of these things I
You're
mentioned.
the one who wants to run the ads against the Republicans. You've seen these.
I'm
you
out
know,
of the
right,
ad
where they
business. I'm
run
out of
the
the ad
ads of,
business.
of Granny being thrown over the cliff.
I'm out of the ad business. I'm just watching with interest to see how all of this pencils out. Because here's what I fear.
Right.
I fear that if you wall off all these different parts of the budget, that it then becomes a rationale for literally taking a meat axe to everything else that touches on people's lives in a positive way. We talked about the opioid crisis, for example, earlier. We need to invest more in programs to help those people. There's not going to be room for that. And there are a whole variety of other things, from the State Department to training and all housing programs and so on. Yeah. And it seems to me that those are important as well. So I am concerned about it.
I hear your complaint, but the reality is 2/3 of the money we spend in Washington, the money is spent in Washington D.C. are entitlement programs, and the big three entitlement programs are Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid. They comprise over half of the budget. Right. So when you say, well, we can't touch those, and let's throw Obamacare, we can't touch that. The Democrats are the ones saying that's walled off, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not saying all that's walled off. He actually wants to put Medicaid and Obamacare on the table. I disagree with him. I think Social Security and Medicare can be done better and more efficiently, and I think they should be on the table.
Yeah, Rick,
but there isn't, as
let me
Stephen
just
said,
make one
there's
point.
not a
You
single
know
Democrat
that
will vote
healthcare
for that.
spending from 2014 to 2019 now is estimated, or at least before these changes that we're going to see, are now estimated to come in about 11% below what they were expected to be because of the reforms that the Affordable Care Act brought. So if you're concerned about health care spending, this was one way, these market reforms were one way
But
to
David, the
reduce
reason for that is because
healthcare.
people are spending more on their premiums. That's why
we
the
have
costs
in
are
the
down.
room crystal clear proof that as different as Donald Trump is, and he is very different, that we still live, breathe, and work in a very polarized Washington. So there are a couple issues at play here. The Speaker today said in a private meeting with reporters that we are hosed, his word, hosed, if you don't deal with Social Security and Medicare down the road from a long-term budget perspective. It is pretty clear this president is not going to do that, not going to take part in that conversation in his first year in office. Can he be bent to get there? Interesting question. The Republicans will have to get him there. But to this point, this is polarized Washington. Yep. Number one, this is easier to do if you get that growth, whether it's 2% or 3%. If you get above, there's more money coming into Washington to have these conversations. I remember back in the day, I believe the senator remembers, when Bill Clinton was president, yep. And I think a Republican senator named Rick Santorum got on an airplane with him and went to town halls out in the country to have this conversation.
Right.
Yep.
You're not going to get to this point until we get back to that point.
Exactly right.
Where people will at least suspend their partisan differences enough to go out in the country and start having these conversations.
Well,
And that sort of stuff doesn't happen now.
No. Well, Chris
It's not
Christie,
happening right
I will
now.
tell
No,
you,
I mean,
during Chris Christie made this case very strongly about touching entitlements, you'll recall. And you've made the case about touching entitlements. But you need a leader who makes a long-term case and says, we're going to start doing this and we'll raise the retirement age very gradually. And you have to
Democrats
tell
used to
people
have
it's going to
courage
die.
on this issue. I mean, Tip
Right.
O'Neill had courage on this
That's
issue.
right.
Bill Clinton had courage on this issue, and they were willing to
right.
talk about the reality that
You're
these
right.
are non-sustainable systems that are in place right now.
we-
No Democrat has any
Right.
courage anymore. They play pure politics on this
And
issue.
it's not going to happen now because the Democratic Party is being pushed more to the left.
Absolutely
You
no.
can't- they're not
That's
gonna
just
do
not
it.
true. Listen,
Medicare and Social Security, you willing to go have a town hall, Rick Santorum?
Bernie Sanders put on the table a solution for Social Security.
He wanted
which
to
is
increase
which-
Social
Hold on a
Security
second.
benefits. He wanted to increase Social Security
Am I
benefits.
talking? Let me finish talking. Listen, he said increase to raise the cap so we bring more revenue
Taxes.
into the
They wanted to
program.
raise taxes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
right.
don't.
That's not a solution
No,
to
that's
raise
courage.
taxes.
Wait, well, hold on a second. You just said the Democrats don't have courage to even touch the
Yeah.
use. That, in fact, is not true.
Hold
The
on.
Democrats have a
If you
different
look
set.
at what
We have a
Bill
different
Clinton,
set
hold on.
of
If you
solutions
look at
than you
what
do.
Tip
That's not
O'Neill
lack of
did,
courage.
and look what Tip O'Neill did, look what Bill Clinton was talking about. He was talking about a bipartisan solution, which did include, yes, some taxes and, yes, some reductions. There's not a single Democrat anywhere in this country
That's not
who's
true.
going to talk about a reduction.
You look at Senator Durbin, who's the number 2 senator Democrat in the Senate, and he was willing to vote for a very difficult plan. When Simpson Bowles was
yeah, we
underway.
said
Just a second, Steve.
election.
But here's let me just make a political point here because you say Democrats are being pushed to the left. The reality is the Republican Party is now the party of older white voters and working class voters. Working class white voters who are death on touching Social Security and Medicare. Donald Trump knows that, and so do a lot of members of the Republican caucus. So let's not make this a partisan issue. There's a lot of reluctance in both parties on this issue, and it's going to take a lot of courage to move forward.
We've got to take
with
a quick
answers.
break. We're going to talk more with the panel ahead. Still, also some of the key moments from the president's speech tonight from viewers who shared their real-time reaction with us online, and a reality check team tells us if the president's jobless numbers add up.